Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, we got a guy, I think his last name says everything. Peter Sainonge, which I believe is French.
Happening.
Sexy tax tariff talk. From the Heritage Foundation, a visiting fellow, we have Peter Sainonge. How are you, Peter?
I am great. I appreciate that introduction.
Yeah.
Yes, it is that sexy.
Yeah, I know. Everybody says it. So without getting it too steamy in here, let's go over the tariffs, because I've always been against tariffs. However,
Right.
I might be wrong. The Donald Trump is making a good case when he's talking about getting rid of the income tax, because tariffs will raise the prices of things, especially if he does it the way he's talking about doing it. But if he is getting rid of or lowering the income tax to, 10%, it's such a boon for the economy that we could make up that deficit and become a very powerful nation again. Tell me I'm wrong.
That's absolutely correct.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
no, you're absolutely right. And economists, the vast majority of economists go after tariffs. They attack Trump over tariffs. And I think they are looking at the trees for the forest here. Because if you replace a tariff, which is basically a sales tax, but it's one that focuses on imported goods, if you replace that with either reducing or, in our dream scenario, abolishing the entire income tax, is absolutely rocket fuel for the economy.
Yeah, hold on.
The reason is because
He just said abolish the income tax. I mean, pay attention, Sarah. He just said abolish income tax. Oh, yeah. All right, go
Thank
ahead.
you.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so you can cue up the background music. So, and he actually floated abolishing it with Joe Rogan a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
He had been going after, he said, no tax on tips, and then no tax on overtime, no tax on first responders, no tax on Social Security. And it was kind of like he was really flirting with just breaking up with the income tax altogether. And when he was on there with Rogan, that's exactly what he did. He said, maybe we should go back to the 1800s when, that was before we had an income tax. It was also before we had a Fed. And back then, the federal government had to live off tariffs. And that was the greatest period, not only of economic growth, but of cultural achievement. It is astounding everything Elon Musk does was invented in the 1880s. Mm-hmm. Computers, magnetism, rockets, Hyperloop. Every single thing came out of there. It was really the golden age of humanity. And the key there was that we did not have an income tax. We did not have a regulatory state. We did not have a Fed. So if Trump can take us back there and all we have to do is like an 8% sales tax on Chinese stocks, that is the deal of the century.
Okay, so let's go over who pays the tariffs, American companies or the foreign country?
Interestingly, during Trump's first term, he put tariffs on China, and China actually paid about 80% of those. So it would issue subsidies to Chinese exporters so they could maintain market share and keep their prices low. So the Chinese government paid the tariffs. So if he does it again, he's talking about hitting China with something like 60% tariffs, and then between a 10 and 20% tariff for everybody else. Now, given Trump's style, he is not going to come in and do that across the board. He's going to come in and use that as a club. Right, so the Europeans specifically, they act like a fortress. They are brutal to outsiders. If you want to export to Europe, they put you over a barrel.
Oh.
You remember a couple of years ago with Brexit, The first thing the European Union did was sat them down and said, nice economy you got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. We're going to need a payment from you every single year. It is literally the mafia. They do that to Norway, Switzerland. All these countries have to fork over billions of dollars to get access to the European market. Now, imagine if we did that. Imagine if we call up Mexico or Canada. We say, hey, listen, we got this beautiful economy. You guys are selling into it. Here, why don't you write me a check for $50 billion to keep access? That's exactly what the Europeans do. So the first thing Trump's probably going to do, given what he did last time, is he'll call up Europe and he will do the exact same thing. He'll say, I got a 20% tariff burning a hole in my pocket. I need you to do something for some things for me. But anyway, even if he does end up applying those to all foreigners, the Europeans are not going to cover the exporters because they're in a deep fiscal hole. They don't have the money. They're already bankrupt. They're not going to do what China did. But a lot of those tariffs, especially the ones for China, are probably going to keep getting paid by China because exports to America are what they live on. If they lose that, the game's over.
And we should not be empowering them, quite honestly. Now, here's why I have possibly turned around. I'm willing to listen to tariff talk because in my cute little head, I keep thinking that all of the when you have an extra $20,000 or $30,000 that you're pulling in every year, whatever it is you were paying in income tax and everything goes down that's made here in America. If you're not paying that income tax, you have a lot of extra buying power, which means most Americans will spend that, and we'll grow our economy, which will put more taxes. Well, we don't have tax, so that wouldn't work. How does it work when you don't have taxes? Go ahead.
Yeah, so just kind of running through the numbers. So the first thing that happens if you get rid of the income tax altogether, so I estimate you get about a 20% jump in incomes in the U.S. So that would be something like $15,000 for a typical family. So that's what you get off the bat. The typical family currently in America pays about $18,000 in income tax. So you save that. And then you knock off about $3,000 for the tariffs. There's a variety of estimates on that, but that seems to be the cluster. So you get a $15,000 raise because the economy is growing faster. You get an $18,000 raise because you don't have to, send your income tax to the government. People don't realize how much they're paying to the government, right? A lot of it is hidden. But at any rate, you've got the what do they call it, withholding. Yeah. Anyway, so that's 33. You knock off 3 for the tariffs, and you look at a $30,000 raise per year, $2,500 a month. Now, currently, the median American take-home is about $58,000, which is about 76 minus the income tax. So you go from taking home 58 to taking home 88, right? That is a massive difference. So that sort of sets the stage. But then next what happens is exactly what you just mentioned.
Hold on. You go from 58 to 88. Oh, yeah. Ding dong, pizza delivery man. Anyway.
Why is that the part you like so much in his movies? It's interesting what he's excited about.
I don't know.
Okay.
All right, go ahead. All right. So
I love it. And it's true. I mean, if you're making 88, you can go to Vegas and things happen in Vegas.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Creating jobs.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, and so that's the fun part, right? Is you mentioned earlier that if you're not paying income tax, then production in the U.S. is cheaper. So instead of the Chinese stocks coming in, they used to come in for $6. Now they're coming in at $9. Fine, but China's paying for that, so they're probably still coming in at $6. But meanwhile, American factories can make socks for less because they are not paying the income tax. There's a very good chance that we're going to steal a lot of that manufacturing, even if the Chinese government pays for the tariffs. So you've got
and that means also because the economy, we're building factories, we're doing things ourselves because we can. Everybody's pay goes up because we need more workers, right?
Exactly. And then if you do mass deportations, then those jobs will actually go to Americans. So you've got two possibilities, right? One of them is that China covers the tariffs, in which case it's a free lunch for us. China's sending us about $500 billion. Well, their share would be, let's say, $300 billion. So that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Or China does not cover the tariffs, in which case Chinese goods are priced out of the market. American goods pay no income tax, so they're cheaper. By the way, every headquarter on earth would try to move to the United States. If you're paying no income taxes in the single biggest economy on earth, everybody is going to be moving here, including the Chinese companies. So, the worst case scenario, the Chinese don't cover it, and then they get out-competed, and all those jobs come back to America. And if it's only Americans living here, then Americans are going to be swimming in jobs.
I mean, this is big. How much?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he has only kind of floated this on the Rogan show. How real do you think this is? Because I know he loves tariffs.
He loves tariffs, and he hates the income tax. So it's beautiful. It's like the perfect mutant president that we could possibly
Peter, isn't the complication here, though, that he can essentially do what he wants with tariffs, but he can't do what he wants with the income tax, and that becomes the heavy lift here.
Right. So he would need Congress to play ball on the income tax, and Congress is very tight, as we're all discussing at the moment. There's a ton of rhinos over there. So that's going to need, the pressure and the passion that people showed during the campaign.
Yeah, but
where millions of Americans showed. We're going to have to put that on the rhinos.
Yeah, I think that if he did, a tour even, and it was just all about income tax, you just have to say to people, you go from 58 to 88 in take-home pay. I think a lot of people will be like, you know what? I love that.
I agree, but you're not going to get, obviously. So in theory, you could put it into a reconciliation bill, right? You could put at least a massive reduction.
Yeah.
You couldn't, not a constitutional amendment, unfortunately. That's what I would prefer, repealing the 16th.
Yeah, me too. You could capture Americans' imagination with this.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty great. I do think you'd have issues with some of these, as you point out, rhino type Republicans who would complain about all sorts of things, including deficit stuff, right? Like they would say, we're going to lose all this income.
All right, so let me take a break, and then let's talk about the deficit, Peter, all right? Peter's saying, Onge, he is, I'm not going to hold it against him for being French. I mean, somewhere in his past, somebody had sex with a Frenchman. Okay, let's move past that. He's with the Heritage Foundation, a visiting fellow.
This is definitely the weirdest interview he's ever done. He's regretting every minute of this.
He's like, this is the end of my career and my credibility. Okay, I think I got this number from you, Peter, but tariffs would bring in about $900 billion, almost $1 trillion. But we're spending now, I don't even know how much, $4 trillion a year, some crazy number like that. So how do you bridge the gap?
About 6.5, yeah.
6.5. Okay. All right, good. So
there's a bit of a gap there.
There's a $5.5 billion trillion dollar gap.
Yeah, so income tax itself is taking about $2.5 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got you've got payroll, you've got excise, things like gasoline, cigarettes, whatnot. You've got capital gains, corporate income tax. Those hopefully would be folded into an income tax repeal. Those last two, you put it together, and you're looking at about $2.4 trillion in lost revenue. And then you've got 900 in tariffs coming in for it. So you got a gap of about 1.5. Now, if the economy grows 20%, then you're going to get about 500 billion more from payroll tax and from excise. So you're looking at a net loss of 1 trillion. Now, I personally would prefer to get rid of the payroll tax as well.
Yes,
payroll tax is
it's worse.
It's not as bad as the income tax, right? Because the income tax is on top of it. It also varies with how much you produce. The payroll tax is a flat tax. So, in a perfect world, we're not taxing work at all. We're taxing bad things, not good things. But in the grand scheme, in terms of incentives, get rid of income tax first, and then we can have the next conversation, which would be getting rid of the payroll tax. So if we just get rid of the income tax, we're talking about 2.4 net of the tariffs, net of the economic growth, you're talking 1 trillion. So you'd be cutting 1 trillion out of a budget of about 6.5. Now, Elon is, he's talking about DOGE, his Department of Government Efficiency, and he's floating 2 trillion. So I haven't seen the math on those. I don't know where that's coming from. I agree wholeheartedly. I'm certain that we can cut much more than that. The easy part is just cutting out the parts of the military that invade foreign countries. So bring them home, put them on the border, put them in the Coast Guard, convert the Navy ships into Coast Guard ships that patrol our waters, stop invading other countries. That'd be a very easy $800 billion. If we look at countries like Japan or UK, which have, the UK has a functioning military, it's got a Coast Guard, although it doesn't use it. It's got nuclear weapons, it's got the whole kit, and they spend less than $100 billion. So that's very easy. Of course, you could cut welfare for able-bodied people, which the government tries very, very hard to hide how much it spends on welfare, but it's easily over $1 trillion. The cost of illegals themselves, which very conservatively is about $150 billion a year, maybe closer to $300 billion by some estimates, because again, they're trying to hide the costs. Pharmaceutical, right? That's going to be coming into focus with RFK here, but there is a ton of waste and corruption in pharmaceutical payments. Those are something like 20% of our economy. So you can go through those, but really, if you sort of zoom out, you're very familiar with the 10th Amendment. There are precisely 4 agencies that are authorized, right? State, Justice, Defense, Treasury, with post offices. And so, strictly speaking, if we had a Supreme Court that actually read the common sense language in the 10th Amendment, almost the entire thing is gone. You would slash everything. Personally, I would keep Social Security and Medicare because they've already been paid for. That's a complicated issue, I think. You've got to make sure that people are protected because they already got ripped off on the way in. But aside from that, almost everything they do, these from DEI to just to the Federal Reserve, all of that is unconstitutional. You slash that down and you're probably more than $3 trillion down.
So do you think we have a shot at doing that? Is he putting the team in around him to do something like this?
So the closest we have, I follow Polymarket very closely. They've got odds on pretty much everything out there.
Right.
And the sort of tip of the spear on income tax repeal is starting with tax on tips, right? That was the one that he most clearly promised. And so that's kind of a proxy for whether, we're going to start hacking away at the income tax.
Right.
So tax on tips is currently running 38% on Polymarket. That's the number I'm watching. That's encouraging because it means it's not just talk, that people with capital behind them believe it's real. But for sure, Congress is going to have to play ball if we're going to get it big.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Peter. We'll have you on again. A great explanation of this. Peter St. Onge, he is with the Heritage Foundation. You can follow him at petersaintonge.com. Good luck spelling Onge. I mean, just saying.